half a decade, we are basing tonight's show around the most viewed and commented story ever posted on this site. It was the great, incredible Paul Harvey's Warning for a Nation. Back in 1964, the iconic radio host wrote an article entitled, "If I Were the Devil," their prediction about where this country was headed. Now listen to the video version that he read back in 1996.
If I were the devil, I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. Thee. So I set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it, until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. What'll you bet? I could get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey.
One day, we will have to stand before the God of history. We will talk in terms of things we've done. It seems that I can hear the God of history saying, that was not enough. But I was hungry, and you fed me not.
It's not just the election issue, but it's a political compromise. Politicians should have done right, but they did wrong. Everything in the banking system is about to change. The small banks are about to be hit with so many regulations that it will put them out of business. Now science has proved that the axis of the earth has started to shift. Not one single life is lost today, but half the nation dies in the next 18 months. Just deadly silence.
Chapter 24. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end.
Who are these people who come into the van?
They are people that are in desperate need. They have no insurance, and they usually wait, we say, until they are train wrecks. Their blood pressures come in emergency levels. We have blood sugars come in 500-600 because they can't afford their insulin.
But why do they not see a doctor or a nurse before they become, as you call it, train wrecks?
Because they don't have any money. They don't have money to pay for labs. They don't have money to go to an ER, and these are very proud people. You go to the ER, you get a $3,500 bill, and then what do? You're given a prescription, you can't fill it. That's why they're train wrecks. They have nowhere else to go.
Thousands of elderly and disabled could soon lose their Medicaid benefits because of a state budget shortfall of more than $500 million. Eviction notices are going out to thousands in nursing homes and group homes.
This is what I do in my spare time.
Betty Waller is 89. A polio survivor. Her home is this nursing home in Baton Rouge. Her life savings pays for part of her care, but Medicaid is needed for the rest.
I mean, I know I'm only living under a bridge somewhere, but still, it's a scary thing.
She was told today she may be evicted by July 1st, one of about 37,000 people in the state who will lose their Medicaid eligibility if the state doesn't balance its budget.
And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington.
No one knows where they're going.
Jim Tucker oversees 12 nursing homes in Louisiana. 800 of his patients could be told to leave.
This has the potential to scare the hell out of a lot of people.
It has the potential to kill people.
The Republican health care plan is this. Die quickly. That's right. The Republicans want you to die quickly if you get sick.
Coming up here on the CBS Evening News, the date that Social Security could run out of money just moved up again. Baby boomers retiring, its payouts now exceed revenue, and a reserve fund could run out by 2034, forcing drastic cuts in...
A lot of what we do, a lot of this interaction between the Congress and the military and the intelligence community depends on trusting each other to get accurate, timely information. When that trust is undermined, then I think we're in a whole different ballgame, and that is a potential consequence that I think people haven't really considered yet.
And we're learning new details this morning about the 15-year-old boy who shot and killed a fellow student. Oregon police say Jared Padgett was heavily armed. He carried an assault rifle, handgun, and knife into a high school outside Portland Tuesday. Padgett took the weapons from home. A teacher was wounded in the attack. Padgett then killed himself, but there is no apparent link between Padgett and his victim, 14-year-old Emilio Hoffman.
This administration needs to be prodded and reminded that our entire sovereignty of the United States is at risk if we do not secure our border, north, south, east, and west.
Heartbreaking videotape taken just before the church massacre that shocked the world. One by one, they arrive at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, preparing for a weekly Bible study class. You even see a little girl go inside. They couldn't know that just 30 minutes later, a rampage would erupt. And this is chilling. You can see a black car pulling into a parking space. It's the killer, Dylan Roof, getting out of the car. He walks to the front door. He adjusts his sweatshirt. His gun is believed to be hidden underneath.
I've just finally decided I had to do it. Somebody had to do something. Because, you know, black people are killing white people every day.
I don't know if y'all can see that. Get out of there! Get out of there!
Thought that shots were coming from inside of a garage, but they were coming from down the street. I made it across the street into the parking lot, and that's...
We had an exchange of gunfire with the suspect. The suspect stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. We saw no other option.
Like you gave a credit card to your teenage daughter or son, and then you just never looked at the bills.
We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months, and now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce.
Right, but you're the Inspector General. My question to you specifically is, do you know who received that $1 trillion plus that the Fed extended and put on its balance sheet since last September? Do you know the identity of the recipients?
I do not know. We have not looked at that specific area at this particular point on those reviews.
Copy of the Inspector General Act here in front of me, and it says, among other things, that it's your responsibility to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the programs and operations of your agency.
That's correct.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, according to Bloomberg, extended $9 trillion in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
No, we have responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operations audits, to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
What have you done to investigate the off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve, which, according to Bloomberg, now total $9 trillion in the last 8 months?
I'll have to look specifically at that Bloomberg article. I'm not, I don't know if I have actually seen that particular one.
We have relegated ourselves to being responsible for giving them a handout. The poor don't want handouts. They want a hand up.
Oh, this is
and
where...
somehow...
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it. until I had killed the incentive of the ambition.
What he said, I take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Worst it's ever been.
Yeah, Steve, I think it's the worst I've seen it. I mean, we've talked about the 90s, we talked about 2000, things have gotten better. The reality is this month of January in Chicago, we have more killings and shootings now in 1 month than we've had since the 90s right now in Chicago. We got to deal with it. You look at whole communities that are abandoned, not just neglected, abandoned. They talk about 5% unemployment in America. That tells me where I live, I'm not part of America. Because I got over 20% in my community. I have lack of economic development, lack of jobs, underfunded schools, boarded up houses, most coming back from prison. You create the perfect storm for this. There's whole communities that look like third world countries. It's a war zone where people live every day. And we tell them, you know, stop shooting and don't sell drugs. I did a funeral of a 26-year-old killed by violence last Friday. Church filled with brothers from the street. I said, how many here right now want to make a change and say they want to do something different? They want to get out of this. They want to stop being part of the problem, be part of the solution. I had 150 brothers come up, some with tears in their eyes, saying, help me. Here's the problem. They come up and say, help me. I can get them GED classes. We teach 2 GED classes. I get them in programs for activities in the art. But then what? If you want to get out of a gang in the city of Chicago, what do you call it, 911? We're forcing him into something because people will survive.
So I set about, however necessary, to take over the United States.
So was Paul Harvey in a way like Nostradamus? With the help of our studio audience, we're going to offer solutions. How do we fix America's problems? But to be clear, we aren't the only ones who believe something needs to be done to adjust the course here at home. According to the latest survey from Rasmussen Report, 62% of those polled said that the country's on the wrong track, and only 30% believe we're headed in the right direction. So to kick things off, we bring in our studio audience. Let's look at the cultures. I think that Paul Harvey, by the way, I think the greatest radio broadcaster ever, and I spent an hour on the phone with Paul Harvey Jr. last night. We were talking about this and his father and what a great broadcaster he was. And look at the antidepressant use in the country. It's up 400%. If you look 1988 to 1994, 2005, 2008, up 400%. Now let's take a look at Miley Cyrus. Just one cultural icon, if you will. Twerking, okay? Put it up on our screen. You can see her over there, and some of the videos. Has the culture declined, and is it related in some way to what Paul Harvey was warning about?
Absolutely. No, it has absolutely declined, and Paul Harvey was exactly right. But what has happened in terms of religion's responsibility as a minister, I shoulder a lot of that responsibility. I look out there and say, what am I doing wrong? What has my generation of ministers and spiritual leaders or religious leaders done wrong? And we made a business out of religion. We made a cult out of religion. But
you're a pastor. You haven't done that, have you?
No, well, it was headed in that direction, and 7 years ago, I left. I unplugged. I left my large church with stained glass windows and high back chairs and organ music, and I started another church in the bowling alley.
Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. And say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coasts and set him for their watchman, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at the watchman's hand.
And they said, or the people said, we will walk according to our own plans, and we will everyone obey the dictates of his own evil heart. Jeremiah 18, 7 through 12. I believe we are living in such a time. What are some of the early evidences that this storm is coming? The basic principle is simply this. Now get this. Sin separates us from God. The storm that is coming to the United States as a combination of more than one element. And when the elements unite, the storm becomes exponentially more dangerous. However, unlike the movie, this storm is not just a storm of merging weather patterns. This storm is worse. When you listen to what's going to be said about the coming events, about things that are going to be happening in the world, please understand this. These things happen when righteousness fails to rule. God wants this nation to be everything it's called to. He loves this nation. He loves America. He loves you.
It seems that the term perfect storm has been used to describe everything under the sun, especially if it's unusual or rare and it had multi-parts that made it come together rather explosively. But 24 months ago, I had only heard the term a few times, and so it was still very profound in my thinking. In other words, it seemed unusual that God would describe it that way.
America is in the middle of two crises these days. One natural, the other man-made. Definitely man-made in the view of our Faith Saley.
Our whole country is watching a fire burn. Literally, of course, I'm speaking of the Los Angeles fires, and our hearts go out to the Angelinos whose lives, pets, and homes are threatened. But there is another figurative blaze engulfing our entire country.
My brothers and sisters, there's going to come a time in your life when you're going to find yourself in a situation like the children of Israel did. You've escaped Egypt on your way to the promised land. But little did you know that on your journey, you would face obstacles. You discover that which you have escaped from is chasing behind you. You know, there are some folk that don't want you to get out of it. There are some people that don't want you to get free of their grasp and their clutches. Then you find yourself standing right in the presence of a Red Sea experience. There are mountains on both sides. What do you do when your past won't let you go and your future won't let you pass? You stand still and see the salvation of the Lord.
A veteran officer told a police recruit to shoot black people, then tried to keep it quiet. Of disturbing racist and sexually explicit Facebook messages. The response to another message from the recruit asking what to do if he caught juveniles smoking marijuana. F the right thing. If they're black, shoot them. Then he suggests having sex with the juvenile's parents. Unless daddy is black, then shoot him.
We got pulled over for a busted tail light in the back. And the police just, he's covered. They killed my boyfriend. He's licensed, he's licensed to carry. He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket, and he let the officer know that he had a firearm and he was reaching for his wallet, and the officer just shot him in his arm. We're waiting for him back. I will, sir. No worries. I will. He just shot his arm off. We got pulled over on Larpener.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license. Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead. Please don't tell me my boyfriend just went like that.
Keep your hands where they are, please.
Yes, I will, sir. I'll keep my hands where they are. Please don't tell me this, Lord. Please, Jesus, don't tell me that he's gone. Please don't tell me that he's gone. Please, officer, don't tell me that you just did this to him. You shot 4 bullets into him, sir. He was just getting his license and registration, sir.
It's a shame that we have to go to the graveyard and bury them. And we have tears, and we shouldn't have tears. We need our fathers and mothers to be by our side.
Make it a hate crime. You gotta make it, you gotta put people in jail. When you shoot somebody under the color of authority, you need to lose your job, and you need to lose your livelihood, and you need to lose your freedom, like every other American loses their freedom. That's right. Need to be consequences, but remember, there are good police officers out there, and the ones that are not, they need to go to jail. They need to go to jail, and don't tell me this. We got to train. Y'all white. Y'all drive all the time and don't nothing happen to y'all. And we black. And I'm afraid to drive my damn car because if they don't know who I am, I could be shot. Until y'all feel that, this ain't never gonna stop. Until you all that are not black feel it and stand with us, this is not going to stop.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand.
It's in your lap right there. I just don't want to put my hands down. I'm really sorry. You're just really wrong. No. I'm just going to wait for many videos of problems. But you're not black. Remember, we only kill black people.
If you white folks want to be treated the way blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
I'm going to start out with Mr. Dent. The victim involved in this tragedy is a 58-year-old black man who was driving his Cadillac in Inkster, a suburb of Detroit, on the evening of January 28, 2015, where his life changed forever. He was stopped by the defendant, a then Inkster police officer, and his partner, Officer Zelenowski. Mr. Dent was stopped for a minor traffic offense and ordered out of his vehicle. With his hands extended out of his driver's window, he was grabbed out, thrown to the ground, and struck 16 times in the head by the defendant. In his attempt to arrest him, he was thrown onto a window shield of a patrol car, bleeding profusely from a head injury. The responding police officers arrived as the defendant is wrestling the defendant to the ground. Mr. Dent was struck, kicked, and tased while on the ground by what appeared to be a group of angry, anxious police officers that celebrated after the defendant was beaten and cuffed. The video in the car shows the police officers fist bumping as a celebratory act of bravery by the defendant and his cohorts. But the one image that struck out to the court was looking at Mr. Dent in his cell, shaking his head. In disbelief of what had occurred to him. If his conduct was indicative of what he was thinking, I would have thought this. What crime did I commit? Being a black man in a Cadillac, stopped for a minor traffic offense by a group of racist police officers looking to do a nigger.
This storm will not be short-lived. It will come in waves, one after another. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst, one element may strike at a 6, while another strikes at an 8. It's the particular combination of elements, the proximity of each element, as well as the intensity of each element, that will make this storm so difficult and seem to last so long.
I submit the churches first. I begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square.
American schools, what were the top problems? We did a whole series on spring break. You were part of it, some of you.
Chewing gum and...
Walking, running in the halls, chewing gum, talking in class. What is it today? Pregnancy, drug use, alcohol abuse, and suicide?
Yeah, segregation wasn't a problem at all. Segregation wasn't the biggest problem in the schools in the 50s. Now we have a new DSM-5 that has given us all these new mental disorders, and now we need to drug all of our children, exactly as Paul Harvey said. It's like he was clairvoyant. And so we're drugging all of our youth, and then we wonder why we've had this massive decline. You take God out, you take away their moral wheelhouse. They have nowhere to go when they have a moral conflict. They don't even know what truth is anymore. And then we're drugging them on top of it. What do we expect?
We're idealizing a time period and looking back on
honestly, as a millennial,
existed at the time.
As a millennial, I think it's really important to know that
Allison, go ahead, remind us that you're younger than everyone else. Go ahead.
There of course are young millennials that are leaving the organized church, but there is a large demographic also that's leaving what they did not like and finding what they did like in religion, and that's right and wrong and structure. There's something to be said about this generation that was raised being told you can do whatever you want, there's no right and wrong, whatever, and then to see the consequential depression, the suicides, the pain that comes from feeling like there might not be a right and wrong and my life is not worth anything. So I think you have to speak to both and talk about why maybe they're leaving the organized.
That's a good point, I think, yeah.
There is, what's happening in American culture today is lack of personal responsibility. What we're, in terms of drugging our children, instead of teaching them about how to handle their emotions and how to handle certain problems, here, take this pill. A teenager gets pregnant, oh, go get an abortion instead of handling it. Parents aren't teaching their kids the way they used to in the 50s and 60s, and that's why what Paul Harvey said was so accurate.
January ended with 51 murders and 299 people shot. Both are up from January 2016.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate.
Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of the dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is part of our destiny. Asking how long will prejudice blind the visions of men?
The marches, the demonstrations, the protests, all of the things that were taking place were fascinating.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Gerald Scott, pastor, New Spirit Revival Center, and black Trump supporter. But speaking of the community, let me just say this real quick. I told you I'm going to try to throw it in. I was recently contacted by some of the top gang thugs in Chicago for a sit-down. They reached out to me because they associated me with you. They respect you. They believe in what you're doing. And they want to have a sit-down about lowering that body count. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going in Chicago.
I think it's a great idea because Chicago is totally out of control.
Well, I let them know. I said, we got to lower that body count. We don't want to talk about anything else. Get that body count down. And they agreed that the principals, they can do it. These are guys straight from the streets, no politicians, straight street guys. But they're going to commit that if they lower that body count, we'll come in and we'll do some social programs. So they're in the
Well, if they're not going to solve the problem, and what you're doing is the right thing, then we're going to solve the problem for them because we're going to have to do something about Chicago. Because what's happening in Chicago should not be happening in this country.
But they want to work with this administration. Good. They want to. They reached out. I didn't reach out to them. They reached out to me. They want to work with this administration. They believe in this administration. They didn't believe in the prior administration. They told me this out of their mouth. But they see hope with me.
I love that.
The incident where the mayor of the city of Chicago was asked in a press conference after a weekend of violence in Chicago where 10, 20, 30 people were shot and killed during one weekend. The mayor was exasperated by the events that had taken place over the last weekend. And he was asked by the reporters to give a reason why so much violence in the city of Chicago from his perspective as mayor. He threw up his hands and he uttered one word, and that one word was values. My quest as the chairman of Black on Black Love, as well as the CEO of this funeral home, who in the year 2012 sat across this desk where you see me now from over 100 mothers whose children, mostly young men, even 6-month-old babies, had been gunned down in the streets of Chicago, and my funeral home, had to service those families.
That there is more and more fire and smoke enveloping the very top of the building, and as fire crews are descending on this area, it does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
My God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
Yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway in downtown New York.
United States Marines are now dead. Climate change didn't kill them. Lack of free community college didn't kill them. The income gap, wage inequality, nope, not those things either. Gay marriage, nope. Oh, white racism? Not that either. Radical Islam. This is not workplace violence. This is not a criminal act with motives unknown. This is terrorism. No, I don't give a flying you-know-what about any of that. I care that this SOB killed 4 of our United States Marines, and I care that our Commander-in-Chief is more concerned with Muslim sensitivity than the honor and sacrifice made by these Marines. Now, this is the 21st time our military men and women have been attacked here at home. This is not a Middle East problem. This is an American problem, and I'm sorry, but I can't sit here and let this go. Not anymore. I come from a family of Marines. My grandpa was a World War II paratrooper, my uncle a Vietnam Purple Heart recipient, my cousins both Marine Corps officers. I have some very close Navy SEAL connections as well. In fact, someone very close to my heart is deployed to the Middle East right now, but the sad thing is, I was telling him last night, I think you're safer over there than you would be right here in the United States of America. Be a leader, someone. Put the fear of God in their desert. God bless you, and God bless America.
Video from the Islamic State uploaded to a social media website on Monday sends a message from its fighters to Americans. It reads, "We will drown all of you in blood."
Dear friends, my name is Işık Abla. I am a former Muslim, and my Facebook post earlier went viral. And the reason is because people wanna know the truth in America now. They have been fed with lies for so long and for so radically. I'm gonna use the word radically. And it is so wrong. And every American citizen needs to know what kind of danger their families are facing, what kind of danger they are facing, and what kind of country, if you don't stand up, you are going to leave your children and to your grandchildren. And this is not fair, folks. And I want to talk to you today. Listen, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And I am one of those foolish things. Take me as a fool, but listen to me. Give ear to me, because this is about your life. This is about your children's life. Search on Google, because media is not telling you the truth. Because most of the media is taken by Saudi Arabia. And most of the colleges are getting fed with money after money from Muslim countries. Why don't you wake up and why don't you listen to the truth? Political jihad, media jihad, educational jihad. They are sending Muslim students to Harvard, Yale, Princeton. And I was part of that jihad. I paid for students' tuitions 23 years ago. There are more than 5,000 ISIS members lived in the United States. America, every state is a terrorist breeding ground right now. They are in your backyards. They are in your schools. They are in your communities. This is not the best solution to bring Muslim refugees to the United States. Every non-Muslim is under this threat. And I am warning you, please, please give an ear and start waking up, standing up, speaking up. Go on your knees and start fasting together. Start putting together prayer groups. People, this is a serious battle. America is at war. And America doesn't know that it is at war.
ISIS is moving into a new phase. It's getting more ambitious, pushing out into the international arena.
And a volatile new threat facing America. They are about harming anybody who does not align with their philosophy.
ISIS has made no bones about it that they consider America to be their #1 adversary.
He said, wait a minute, boys. He said, we're out. If we stay like we are, we're going to die. America, if we stay like we are, we're going to die. If we keep fighting each other, majoring on the minor, we're going to die. If we don't connect and get our best and brightest, we're going to die. If we don't come together and stop fighting over foolish things, we are going to die. Don't think that we don't have enemies that are ready to take this country. If we don't get together, we are going to die. The things we are fighting about are trivial compared to what we have to lose. We have got to get together or we are going to die.
God can fashion a disaster. A lot of people don't understand that, but we're living in the times, I believe, of Ezekiel and Jeremiah, who wrote that God can bring a disaster upon our nation if we continually choose to walk according to our own plans.
But when we look at what's ahead for this storm and the combination of storms heading towards it, it reminds us a lot of another storm in recent history. Category 2 Hurricane Sandy will roar through the Caribbean after pounding Jamaica and Cuba with winds up to 114 miles per hour. This storm has already taken 2 lives. And forecasters fear it will soon be similar to another powerful storm that occurred in 1991.
A disaster of epic proportions. It would be the perfect storm.
But the perfect storm stayed off the coast of New England when Hurricane Grace joined with a powerful nor'easter, bringing 50-foot waves and gale-force winds. This storm could be worse, and forecasters say it could blast much of the East Coast, even coming on shore, starting this weekend. As Hurricane Sandy moves up the coast, it will meet up with an Arctic front moving across the U.S. and get extra support from the jet stream with a blast of Arctic air from the north. 3 elements colliding over the country's most populated corridor.
Temperatures for 135 years now, and they report that 2014 was the hottest on record. What's to blame? The experts are nearly unanimous. We are.
As one climate scientist put it, quote, any whiffs of doubt that human activities are at fault are now gone with the wind. Vicente Arenas has the story.
In Miami Beach, ocean water often floods downtown streets where sea levels are rising at an alarming rate. In South Florida, they're expected to rise 5 to 7 inches in the next 30 years due to global warming. The city is installing massive flood pumps at a cost of $300 million to try to keep the water out. How concerned are you about the rising sea level?
We're concerned from a perspective of we need to do something about it now. We can't wait.
Scientists around the world share the urgency. Today's report says every ocean is warmer than ever before. The results are melting glaciers, threatening wildlife, and producing extreme weather, including stronger typhoons in Asia and the record drought in California. Last year, the Earth warmed 1.24 degrees above the 20th century average.
The deep reds represent record warm. So these were the record highest temperatures ever observed. California.
Dr. Tom Carl is the director of NOAA's Climatic Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina.
It's very clear that the weather and climate that you've grown up with is not going to be the weather and climate you're going to experience or your children are going to experience.
Heavy smoke and an orange sky hung over downtown Gatlinburg, the roads packed with motorists trying to get out of town. The wind downing power lines and trees, sparking even more smaller fires.
This will be one that I will always remember in my career. I mean, when you go into the city of Gatlinburg, there is fire on all sides of the city.
The Park Service calls this a perfect storm of drought conditions coming together with strong, sustained winds. Some 1,200 people were holed up in shelters, with 12,000 left without power. Down from the Glendora foothills below.
It's havoc. It's bad. It's bad. It hasn't been this bad in a long time. It wasn't like this 20 minutes ago.
Western edition, we're going to begin tonight in Hawaii, the island paradise dealing with a hellish invasion of hot lava from an erupting volcano. Dozens of homes and other buildings have been destroyed. More than 1,000 people have been forced to evacuate.
A fountain of lava more than 100 feet high. Telephone poles lighting up like matchsticks. And this time-lapse video shows a house being consumed by molten rock. These are the haunting images of Kilauea unleashing its fury. The lava lava has already devoured more than 24 homes in the neighborhood of Leilani Estates. This car never stood a chance.
Up here in the helicopter, you can really see the destruction down below. You don't see any firefighters down there because there is nothing they can do. This is an unstoppable force.
The volcano will erupt and begin to become active and eventually erupt in the United States again.
Volcanic activity can last several millions of years.
Tonight, torrential rains pummeling drought-stricken California.
As Amos 4:7 says, I, or God, I make it rain on one city, and I withheld rain from another city.
Combined with 60-mile-an-hour winds and golf-ball-sized hail, setting off massive mudslides.
So it was scary. It was scary.
What, we had fire, drought, and now torrential rain. So yeah, pretty much everything.
Yeah, we've hit all 4 elements at this point. I think we're done at this point with any more crazy.
I've seen a few, but I've run out of ways to say I've never seen one like this. It is as if the nation is enduring some kind of curse. What should we expect next? That it will rain frogs? I wouldn't bet against it. Most Americans believe we're headed in the wrong direction. The world is a more dangerous place. And yet the government is in such gridlock that it took Congress longer to approve money to find a vaccine for the Zika virus than it took the founders to write our Constitution.
There will be thunderstorms with softball-sized hail and 24 inches of rain within a 24-hour period of time.
Tonight, a barrage of hailstones hit that region with frightening force. Here's David Begnaud.
One woman said it sounded like God was throwing rocks at them after the early morning hailstorms showered North Texas.
Just never in my life seen or even imagined anything like this.
Hail as large as baseballs pelted homes and cars, along with high winds and heavy rain.
There's going to be places where 3 feet of snow will fall in a 6-hour period of time. There will be times when tornadoes strike this nation with winds of more than 350 miles an hour, and there will also be tornadoes in unusual places. In other words, places that typically don't have tornadoes will experience them. There will be a hurricane that ends up striking this nation with winds of over 180 miles an hour and storm surges that flood miles inland. There will be a hurricane, at least one hurricane, with a storm diameter of around 500 miles.
It is like going over a giant all-you-can-eat buffet for a hurricane right now.
Tonight, the eye 30 miles wide, with the clouds swirling around it 600 miles across, with the inner core equivalent to an EF3 tornado. Most striking, the longevity of Irma's power. That record-breaking stretch of 185 mile-per-hour sustained winds for over 36 hours.
There will be an epidemic that will take many lives, and it will not just be here in the United States, but it will also be here and elsewhere. It might actually begin elsewhere and come in here.
The CDC says the flu is more severe and sending people to the hospital at a higher rate than any year since 2009. By the end of this season, it's predicted 700,000 people will have been hospitalized and 34 million will have contracted the virus. Surprisingly, the second hardest hit group, baby boomers. Doctors like Bobby Kapoor of Miami's Jackson Memorial Hospital are urging people not to let their guard down, even though flu season is halfway over.
I think it's a confluence of events, also maybe a perfect storm, where we have individuals such as baby boomers who have lower numbers than typical for vaccinations.
So a nasty strain of the flu and a segment of the population that may have not gotten the shot are leading to what we're seeing.
That's correct.
We've created a house of cards. Remove just one, and everything falls apart. And what's fueling the system?
Money. Americans can spend $90 billion in a single day of shopping. Last year, 200 million people swarmed their local stores on November 23rd. We call that day Black Friday. Did you know that a flu virus can survive on the surface of a banknote for up to 17 days? One day there will be a pandemic. It could begin during the crush of Black Friday sales. A pathogen will jump from tainted banknotes to human skin. onto food, toys, children, and loved ones. By the time patient 0 feels the first sore throat, millions of people will already be infected. From this point, the breakdown will happen fast.
Day 1. Hospitals will reach capacity. Panic will strike. Day 2. Quarantine zones will be established. Resources will be rationed. Transport will go into lockdown. Day 3. International trade will stop. The oil will dry out. The stock market will collapse. Day 4. The power will fail. The shelves will be empty. The taps will run dry. And once hunger and despair take hold, people will do anything for survival. By day 5, everyone will be a potential threat.
In 2007, a new presidential directive was signed quietly into law. This maps out the government's response to a crisis, a plan to cope with a real dark winter. It is known as Directive 51.
Our complex world is primed for breakdown.
And once the chaos strikes,
there won't be resources to save us all.
The only question left is, what will it take to save what remains?
In addition to drought and devastation from storms, these storms are actually going to dramatically cut into various harvests, and national food shortage will happen as the food storage program begins to be depleted.
I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure.
And they said, or the people said, we will walk according to our own plans, and we will everyone obey the dictates of his own evil heart.
First of all, tell us about this curriculum and the motivation behind it.
Well, it's interesting. The school board voted earlier in May to add gender identity. It's not a part of the state law. It's not a part of the state school board instruction, but they've decided to add it against the will of many of the parents. And so now what we're dealing with is a vote on the family life education. Now, while we're talking specifically about Fairfax, I think it's important for people to understand this is happening across the country. So I may talk about Virginia, but listen carefully for your own community.
Wow. Well, how will this curriculum impact the students?
Well, it's very interesting. Right now, what will happen is, starting in kindergarten, they'll talk to them about same-sex or gay marriage. And the parents will not be able to opt out. One of the big issues is, in Virginia, parents can opt their children out of certain parts of the, quote, family life education. And so now what they're doing is they're trying to move parts of it from FLE, family life education, to health, which means the parents cannot opt their children out.
What is the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity?
The difference between sexual orientation and gender identity is sexual orientation is who you have sex with and how you have sex. Gender identity is who you are, male, female. Are you born male or female? Are you born nothing? And they want to break down those definitions so you're no longer male or female as God created us. You're one of 52, quote, genders, or one of 100 and something genders, depending on who you talk to. Again, they want to force this on the kids in Fairfax County when in fact it's not a part of the SOLs or the required education.
What's been the reaction from parents, and what can parents do?
Well, in Fairfax County, it was interesting because the night of the vote on gender identity, the police, they hired a special police force, security. They actually locked 200 parents out so they couldn't get in, even though there was standing room in the back. Courage isn't maybe the word. Blackmail or force. Here in Fairfax County, we were told that the Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education and Department of Justice would see to it that our federal tax dollars were pulled if gender identity wasn't added. What that means is those monies that are meant to help educate and provide for poor children, children that may be going without meals, that funding would be taken. So here we hear all this outcry about Republicans are, not looking out for kids, when in fact, when the president and his allies want to push this gender identity agenda, they don't care about poor children.
It is a sweeping policy change to accommodate transgender students, which would allow kids to use the bathroom and facilities of the gender they identify with. The guidance is not legally binding, but could lead to a cut in federal funding to districts that don't comply. More now from NBC's Kate Snow.
For kids like Jacob LeMay, the guidance that students should use the bathroom of their gender identity isn't just some abstract policy. His mom, Mimi, says it's protection for him at school and validation that his rights matter.
When I send Jacob off to school, I want to make sure that he's treated the same way as any other student, that he can use the facilities that he's comfortable with. This means a lot to us.
We first met Jacob a year ago, just after he transitioned to living as a boy at 4 years old.
I wanted to be a boy. You wanted to be a boy? Did you feel that on the inside? Did you feel inside like you wanted to be a boy? Yeah. What did you say to your mom and dad? I want to be a boy.
In Jacob's home state of Massachusetts, the state legislature just yesterday passed a bill banning discrimination against transgender people. But in other states across the country today, there was backlash against the federal government. Arkansas, Mississippi, and Texas telling schools to disregard the guidance.
Well, in Texas, he can keep his 30 pieces of silver. We will not yield to blackmail.
But advocates for LGBT rights say what happened today goes far beyond bathrooms.
California considering new legislation now that would add the history of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people to its social studies curriculum. Supporters say passing this legislation will help curb anti-gay stereotypes.
But opponents, Gretch, are taking issue with a portion of the measure prohibiting schools from using any instructional materials that, quote, reflect adversely on gay people. Tucker Carlson, Fox News contributor and founder of Daily Caller, joins us from D.C. Morning to you, Tucker.
Good morning.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I get where history books should be about people who have impacted our history, but now they've got to find people from this particular demographic to fulfill the bill?
There are two problems with this. The first is that it's frivolous. California public schools are failing by, I would say, any measure. That's well known in the state, my home state. I mean, what percentage of California's public school seniors can identify the Magna Carta? What percentage Leon Trotsky? I mean, Leon Trotsky's sex life may be interesting, but it's not central to why he's a world historic figure. He made the Russian Revolution popular, which changed history. That's the essential fact to know. And so you're not preparing kids for life by dwelling on the sex lives of people to the exclusion of understanding why the world is the way it is today. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I'm not against learning about gay people, of course not, and many of them affected history. But their sexual preference isn't most of the time at the center of why they're important. So it's telling kids stuff that isn't central to understanding the world. Second, it's propaganda. It's lying. Whenever a school system is mandated by law to teach happy news, non-controversial, complimentary facts about a group of people, they are, by definition, excluding the unhappy facts, and they are, therefore, lying. That's propaganda.
Is it another example of parents will have to opt out of this program if they don't like it, instead of having people opt in for something that maybe only a few want to participate in?
Look, no, my understanding is this would be mandatory. And
The discrimination program focused on gender diversity is drawing outrage from some conservative groups. Correspondent Claudia Cowan takes a fair and balanced look.
I see a lot of hands.
Instead of the 3 R's, these elementary school kids in Oakland spent class time focusing on gender diversity and how they can choose to be a boy or a girl or both.
Gender identity is about in here. It's about what's up here and in here.
As part of a program said to combat bullying, Redwood Heights Elementary brought in Gender Spectrum, an activist group whose mission is to create more gender-sensitive environments for kids.
True or false? Animals have only 2 genders.
These 4th graders were told that in nature, things aren't always what they seem. Some dolphins have both boy and girl parts, and clownfish can switch genders. Gender Spectrum says that diversity applies to people, too.
Medical advances in organ transplants will make it possible for homosexual men to become in vitro fertilized and give cesarean birth.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It's like, right, I mean, everybody knows that. Or do we have to write this, that all men are created? I mean, how else would we get here? Everybody's created. We got that. That they are endowed by their creator, here we go, with certain unalienable rights. So where did your individual right come from? They would say, well, your individual right came from your individual God. Your individual rights came from God. That we don't have rights because the government gives us rights. We have rights because God gave us rights. These rights actually came from God. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There was an assumed, this is so important, there was an assumed connection between God and rights. They believed that we as individuals and as a nation were accountable to God for how we exercised our individual rights. Now, here's what John Adams wrote. Think about the significance of these words. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. Our Constitution was written, made, created only for people who are moral. That is, they believe there was a moral sense of right and wrong that stood outside of their personal understanding of right and wrong. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. In other words, if there is no moral consensus, the sense of divine accountability, this grand experiment of personal freedom will fail. If there's no sense of morality that stands outside a human being, and if there's no sense of divine accountability, this experiment in freedom will fail. Liberty will devour liberty. Eventually, my rights will compete with your rights. Who's to say who's right? When rights collide, the courts decide. That was not the intent of the Founding Fathers.
The main thing that the framers attempted to do, and this is the genius of the Constitution really, is the separation of powers, the awareness that if too much power accumulated in any actor of government, we're on the road to tyranny. And that's what I think he's undermined here.
Individual rights regulated by law. Individual rights, free to do whatever you want, say what you want, sleep with who you want, run around with who you want, do what you want, Facebook, be crude, take off your clothes, protest the soldier's funeral, heckle the president's speech. I mean, we got all kinds of, incredible laws. But this is what I don't want you to miss. This is a recipe. This is a recipe for you and for me to be as selfish as we can legally be. And in this system, rights become nothing more. Rights become nothing more than an exercise of power. And at the end of the day, the culture in which we will find ourselves, the culture in which we are finding ourselves, is simply this. The rich will always rule the poor. Women will continue to become more and more of a commodity. Children will always be the victims. If it's legal, it's moral. If it's legal, it's moral. If it's legal, it's moral. Law informs conscience. Well, how do I know how bad I'm supposed to feel about something? Well, what does the law say? And everybody looks for a...
I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct.
Probably none of you know what's in the Ninth Amendment. This should be your favorite amendment. The Ninth Amendment is the catch-all amendment. There are other individual rights that go beyond what's listed. And so here's what the Ninth Amendment says. It says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights, the ones we just talked about, shall not be construed to deny or disparage talking about other rights, retained by the people. So that's just a lot of gobbledygook language to say, hey, we're not listing all the individual rights in these amendments. We're just listing some specific ones, but there are other ones that go beyond the ones that are listed. Isn't this fascinating? So anyway, if we were to rewrite the Ninth Amendment in our 21st century vernacular, and were to write it the way that we express it as we think about our individual rights, here's what it might look like. What we would write it this way: that we have the right to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, as long as it doesn't interfere with anyone else's amended Ninth Amendment rights. Because that's how we think as Americans. I'm an American. I can do what I want. Here's the problem. Every parent knows this. Every parent knows this. If you give someone rights, but you don't couple those rights with responsibility, things go horribly wrong. If you give people rights, but you don't harness those rights with responsibility, things go horribly wrong. Every parent knows with rights come responsibilities. In other words, individual rights must be coupled with individual responsibility, or things go bad. In a nation where there are rights without responsibility, it results in anarchy. That liberty without responsibility actually undermines liberty. That liberty without responsibility ultimately undermines liberty. That liberty, as we're going to see, can gobble up liberty. That if everybody demands their individual rights with no consideration for other people and without taking responsibility for the outcome of their liberty, ultimately everybody loses their liberty. The laws have to cover every single eventuality because American citizens are constantly looking for loopholes. Aha, that one's not covered, I'm free. Aha, you didn't say it exactly right, you gotta let me go. And in a culture where everybody's looking for a loophole, because their only accountability is to government and to written law, ultimately the courts have to decide. Now here's the problem. The law answers the question, how low can I go? Okay, how fast can I drive without getting pulled over? How fast can I drive and get pulled over, but they're not going to give me a ticket? How fast can I drive? They're going to pull me over and give me a ticket, but not take me to jail. How fast can I drive and not take my license? How fast? In other words, where's the line? Where's the limit? And what happens is when there's only law and there's no sense of accountability, divine accountability, personally or nationally or corporately, we go as low as we can possibly go. The law is powerless. The law doesn't inspire greatness. The law can't inspire excellence, and the law can't inspire or create virtue. It can only answer the question, how low can you go?
All right, before we bring back our studio audience, he's talking about divisiveness and families at war with themselves and churches and nations at war with themselves. Let's just take a little listen to our, contemporary political debate.
They really are kidnapping the U.S. government. It's only about 30 people on the wacko right. Why doesn't he just go at these people?
We are for cutting spending. We're for reforming our tax code. We're for reforming our entitlements. What we're not for is negotiating with people who have a bomb strapped to their chest.
Damn right Dick Cheney's heart's a political football. We ought to rip it out and kick it around and stuff it back in him. Do you know what they're talking about? Like this right-wing slut, what's her name, Laura Ingraham? Yeah, she's a talk slut.
Noah, you work in the media? Are we divided? You watch every show? You follow what's going on? Are we really divided politically now?
Yeah, we're divided politically, absolutely, because it's been beneficial for ratings. And we've decided that we're going to bifurcate along political lines, especially in the political press and cable news and what have you. But that's not necessarily a new phenomenon either.
In the old days, we used to have dual.
I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he
The church that you see is not the church that Jesus built.
Of the church and us being a hospital, and we are that, but it seems to me that we have become more of a hospice with the homosexual, because they're going to die in their sin if they haven't repented. But yet we still in the church are accepting it and saying and not calling it sin. That's the problem. When you say you can continue to live in this lifestyle, and there's churches that have same-sex singles ministries and stuff like that, then you're not a hospital, you're a hospice. And a hospice just says, you're dying, I'm just going to make you feel comfortable until you die.
We're really close to calling evil good and good evil in this nation.
We already do that. We already do that. I mean, we're doing that.
It's becoming rampant, though.
Yeah.
There's a difference between periodically here and there. You know, the abortion issue has always been evil, and others calling it good. Right. But now we're rampant. Our eyes have been so blinded as a culture. Now it's becoming a rampant escalation of that.
They always vilify the Christians and anyone who says homosexuality is a sin or that abortion is wrong. Right. We're always the evil, weird people. Right. I mean, because that is the mentality in America. Yeah.
To continue living the good life. How good? Here's Lisa Guerrero and the I-Squad with a look at some who've been preaching prosperity who are living large.
Fresh wind! Fresh!
They are some of the most popular TV preachers in the country.
We're family here!
They urge the faithful followers to donate generously, and in return, the Lord will bring them prosperity.
I'm not going to be going to heaven and be broke when I get there.
And there's no denying some people have prospered handsomely.
Wow!
The pastors themselves. They live like rock stars with huge mansions, private jets, and fancy cars. Their lifestyles are so lavish, 6 of them have been investigated by the U.S. Senate.
And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle.
Like Paula White, who lives in multi-million-dollar homes in New York City and Tampa, Florida. And Creflo Dollar. He gets around in style, flying in private jets to preach around the country. He owns this mansion in an exclusive Atlanta suburb.
Mr. Dollar, how do you...
Not one of them would agree to an interview about their opulent lifestyle.
How do you justify your million-dollar mansions and your jets to all of your donors, sir?
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to opulence, few religious leaders compare to Kenneth Copeland.
Hey, you and I are supposed to always have.
To show you his house, we rented this helicopter so you can see his 18,000 square foot mansion valued at over $6 million.
He lives in this home outside Fort Worth, Texas. It has beautiful water views and comes complete with a boathouse. But that's not all. Copeland is an avid pilot, and here's his pride and joy, a $20 million Cessna Citation jet. It's the fastest private jet money can buy. He said he needed it to better serve the Lord, and proudly did a flyby for his followers after the church bought it.
Shout amen!
But it's not just one plane. We found a fleet of planes registered to the church. And you won't catch him waiting in line at the airport because he's got his own, the Kenneth Copeland Airport, located right next to his mansion.
I think Copeland is unbelievably greedy.
Ole Anthony heads the Trinity Foundation, a religious watchdog group that worked closely with the Senate committee investigating Copeland and other TV preachers.
Televangelism alone is at least a $2.5 to $3 billion industry, untaxed, unregulated.
That's right. By law, religious groups like Copeland's are exempt from federal taxes, and they don't have to report how they spend their money to anyone.
Amen.
Copeland's church takes in tens of millions a year through donations and selling books and DVDs to his donors.
She sent them a lot of money, a whole lot of money.
When Christy Parker's mother died of cancer, she found diaries that showed her mother sent Copeland most of her life savings, hoping her faith and donations would cure her of her terminal disease.
What do you think of Kenneth Copeland's lifestyle?
TV doesn't do it justice. Their office furniture is probably worth more than most people's houses. It makes you sick.
Oh, my.
Copeland refused our request for an interview, so we caught up with him at an event in North Carolina.
Why you're living such a lifestyle of luxury off of church donations?
Ma'am, I don't think we have time for this. Thank you.
Why won't you answer our questions?
A hotel employee tried to prevent us from taping.
Well, wait. Hold on.
Come here.
It's just a simple question, sir.
Yes, I'm going to give you a simple answer.
Thank you.
My lifestyle follows the scripture. We give, we believe, we're open.
You have a fleet of private jets. Why is that necessary? You're a minister. How many private jets do you have?
Right after that, he walked away.
Many churches will file bankruptcy as payments on large buildings cannot be made. Large ministries will disband from financial difficulty. House churches will begin to grow in number as a need for intimacy increases. Hidden sexual perversion in church leadership will be exposed. And I'm not talking about in the Catholic Church. I'm talking about elsewhere. And the numbers will be shocking to many of those remaining in the church.
It's important, and we're talking about Paul Harvey being prophetic, but I hope it drives people to action. It shouldn't drive them to indifference, which if you get out of the bubble, and people are cynical, people are like, it's too rough, it's too hard, the problems are too big. Indifference isn't the answer. Get engaged, get involved, do something.
Katie? Yeah. Is there spiritual forces at work there?
I think there are. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I think it's very hard. I know there are a lot of Christians that will say, I believe in God, but I don't believe in the devil. But Jesus believed in the devil, so.
The basic question before a democratic society is this: how ought we to live together? And seeking an answer to this question: can society exclude moral truth and moral reasoning? Set yourselves apart from this corrupt generation, my brothers and sisters. You weren't made to fit in. You were born to stand out.
Old Testament, whether it's secular, meaning social, whether it's spiritual, meaning Holy Ghost filled Christian believer, or whether it's a believer with a carnal mindset, the Word of God says in the Old Testament, if you obey my word, I will bless you with blessings. If you disobey me, I will curse you with curses. So you need to know now why you do what you do, not just to the gay Christian, but to the liar, to the thief, to the baker man, and the Indian chief too. You had better realize why you're doing what you're doing, because you've got to give an account for it. And the church is weak. We're contaminated. We are thin because everybody wants to be opinionated. If you stand on the word of God, you cannot go wrong. And so salvation, Jesus died to provide it, whether you believe he did it or not, whether you accept it or not. He has done it. Hallelujah. And so for the gay man, for the alcoholic, for the ex-whoremonger, for the ex-alcohol drinker, for the ex-DJ, for the ex-stepper, Jesus has already did it. And as a pastor, we are responsible, according to Jeremiah chapters 2 and 3, for causing the sheep to go astray. If the pastors don't start teaching truth, stop straddling the line, folks are going to fall and go to hell, and the blood will be required at the hand of the leadership.
To be in peril is to be in danger. To be in a perilous position is to be in a hazard-threatening position. And while we love what we see going on in many ways, we are in a very dangerous position as an American. And the question is, what are people doing about it? Well, so many people are blind to the truth. They don't see it. They are asleep. They don't feel it. And some just don't care.
But the question has to be asked, why is this storm coming? Well, this storm is coming because the church, the body of Christ, really is no longer the backbone of this nation. From our inception, the Christian faith has been the plumb line of decisions made at all levels of life in this country. The Christian founding of this nation is what makes it different from every other nation on the face of the earth, maybe other than Israel. Other nations may have become Christian in their focus, but none were initially formed with Christianity as the core of its DNA.
If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door.
Paul Harvey talked about drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors in every schoolhouse. Guess what we have in a lot of inner-city schools today? Drug-sniffing dogs, metal detectors before they get to school.
The one thing we don't have in public schools is God.
We have seen over the past 20, 30 years a concerted effort to remove the Judeo-Christian values out of the public arena.
Liberals don't want to accept is that the real truth actually works. The psychology here is astounding. If you think about,
by the way, this is Dr. Gina Lau.
we went from a culture where I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and the fact of the matter is that when you are someone who's suicidal, for example, and you're a mental health professional, the first thing you tell them to do, what? Go help somebody else. We've lost that. Instead of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Sean, now it's I should get a trophy for doing absolutely nothing.
You participated. You showed up. You deserve a trophy.
This American civilization was conceived, established, dedicated, and founded on a biblical cornerstone. America was brought into existence for the will and the purpose of God. On this night, over 200 years ago, George Washington held in his hand the first ever presidential address. In that address was a prophetic warning. It was this: the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself hath ordained. In other words, if America should ever turn away from God and his ways, if it should ever disregard his eternal rules of order and right, then his blessings, the smiles of heaven, would be removed from the squares, out of their culture, out of the lives of their children. They worshipped idols and served other gods. They celebrated immorality and they persecuted righteousness. They lifted up their children on the altars of foreign gods. And the blessings of God were removed from the land and replaced with judgment. It is 2,500 years later, and America has made the same mistake. We too have turned away from God. We too have driven him out of the government, out of our public square, out of our culture, out of the lives of our children. We too have profaned the sacred and sanctified the profane. And we too have killed our most innocent, over 55 million of our unborn children, and our collective hands are covered with blood. What we were warned never to do, we now have done.
But it has a lot of people talking. The final phrase of an airman's oath is now optional.
Now, this comes after an airman took the words, "So help me God," out of his oath during a ceremony at a Nevada air base.
Colonel still lives by the words, "So help me God." Varner says those words shouldn't be optional in the oath.
I think it's a major mistake that the military will no longer recognize that we do our duty, that we defend the Constitution of the United States because we have a belief in the Almighty.
Joseph Peterson says the Navy taught him about God and country.
It took God out of the Pledge of Allegiance.
We are seeing a new world order being built in the early 21st century.
The motto of Harvard in the beginning was Christ and the Church.
Christ and the Church.
Christ and the Church. And then later was Christ and the Church and Truth. Do you know what the motto is today?
What is it?
Truth.
Well, when you move God out the way and say, we don't want God. We don't want God in our schools. We don't want God on our money. We don't want God pledge allegiance to, when we make the pledge allegiance, we don't want to use God's name. We're moving God out of everything. When you move God out of everything, that leaves it open for the enemy to come in. So the enemy, of course, going to come in where you're telling God can't come in. And this is why we're having that problem. It's because we are not allowing God in there. So when the enemy comes in, he destroys. The Bible said the enemy comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. So the word says what is going to happen. So you can't blame God. Only thing you're going to do is look at the ones who putting God out of the school. Those ones need to cry and say, let's put God back in the school, and you'll see a change in our schools. You see a change in our home. You see a change in our young people if we put God back in it.
Being discouraged, we should be motivated. The truth is powerful, and because it was God's truth that created this nation, God's truth can also rescue it. Too often we've caved in to the demands of those who want to remove God's voice out of public life because he'll impede them from doing what they want to do. We have to say enough. We've seen what their vision of America has in store for us, and it's an ugly picture. Instead, we need to enlist in the battle to reclaim America's soul.
This is a new nation when we think about history and world history. And this country was allowed to emerge and become what it is because of the grace of God. And those who founded this nation understood that. And that's why, America hasn't been destroyed like other nations that have fallen, because there are still people here who call on the name of the Lord.
Wickedness inhabitants. Repent, America. Change. For at this time. Do you hear what I'm saying? But that's because we let down the steps. We didn't let down the steps. Hallelujah. Everybody want to let down, want to drop the ball. Amen. Been in the Congress. The God says all right. Hallelujah. My hand is not slack. As you touch slack this, oh God will come and kill somebody. Get that track. And then get a hand of sin. And then back out. Hallelujah. You're just wicked man. How much too late? Repent.
The doctrine of the redemption of original sin is roughly like this. God, the creator of the universe, the deviser of the laws of physics, of quantum mechanics, of relativity, this genius God couldn't think of a better way to forgive our sins than to come down to earth as his alter ego, his son, having himself hideously tortured and executed so that he could forgive himself on behalf of all mankind, including future people, whether or not they actually intended to sin when their time finally came.
As I go to prayer, we can't forget about the 17 families that lost their children in Florida. What a horrific loss. Can you conceive of getting a phone call as a parent that your child has been killed? And so I'm going to pray for those families. But a number of people have asked me this week, why is this happening? Why is this happening? There is a cause-effect relationship. 2 Chronicles chapter 15, verses 3 to 6. It says, in those days there was no true God, no teaching priest, no law. There was no peace to him who came in or to him who went out. It says, citizen rose up against citizen, city rose up against city, nation rose up against nation, for God troubled them with every kind of distress. So here is why it's happening, and here is why it will happen more. The further you remove God, the more chaos fills the vacuum. It's as simple and as difficult as that. Because when you remove God, you remove his value system. See, with God is not just a name, it's a value system. And when you lose that value system, nature abhors a vacuum. Filling that space of the absenteeism of God because he's been dismissed from our culture, from our schools, from our politics, then that empty space of his exclusion is filled with evil. Now, we know we've got to be responsible, and we do. We take security responsible. We've added to our security here. We added to it across the street because we know that evil is present. And so we will do our part. But all the security in the world, you could have a police person in every aisle. If people don't care about their lives, they're not going to care about yours. Because what you're living with today is the dumbing down of the conscience. The dumbing down of the conscience. And as more people's consciences dumb down, the more chaotic they will be at a younger age. And so that's why it is absolutely critical. The Bible has a cause-effect relationship. The Bible says, if you shed innocent blood, more innocent blood will be shed. So the more abortions you have, the more violence you'll see. See, so all of this is interconnected theologically and spiritually. The world doesn't recognize that. It's critical that we as Christians recognize that and do our part in bringing God back. in an appropriate, responsible, kind, non-forced way, but to bring God back. When God left the school, chaos entered in. Wherever God is removed, chaos will fill that space in your life, in your family, in our culture. So, we will do our part as a church for you, for our community, to get God back in the proper place so that we can bring ease to a chaotic world.
Since Adam and Eve through today, the actions of humankind have given room for the enemy to strike and attack humanity. So how does this happen? It really is pretty simple. If you could picture you as this hand, or this nation as this hand, and God's hand covering it. Sin, whenever we sin, causes God's hand to lift. To the degree God's hand lifts, the enemy has a chance to come in. And right now, God's hand is lifting off of this country. Some people call this judgment, and I would agree. If that's the definition of what judgment is, I would agree that this is judgment. Judgment simply being then the removal of God's hand allows the enemy to attack his people. The only legal way the enemy has access to us is by the hand of God lifting. This results in there being a space between him and us. And as that space increases, we distance ourselves from him and his ways. Anytime there's an increased distance between God and humanity, it leaves room for attack to come, and for principalities and powers of the air, rulers of darkness, to take up residence, afflicting the people or a nation. The longer the dark powers reside over an area, the more the people begin to call right wrong and wrong right. In other words,
we're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right.
If you bite and devour each other, watch out or you will be destroyed by each other.
And that's
that would be the thing that makes us different from the rest of the animal world. So we can behave, we can get along with one another, help one another, compassion. That really, to me, is the essence of Jesus.
It devolves into individual rights, every man for himself, every woman for herself, every family for themselves, every community for themselves. He says, let me just tell you where it goes. You will become like dogs, fighting and devouring one another, and at the end of the day, you will be destroyed by each other. But church, and only the church, can turn that around.
I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey.
Gonna make a change for once in my life.
If I were the devil, I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree.
Gonna make it right.
So I set about however necessary to take over the United States.
As I turned up the collarbone, my favorite.
Why do they not see a doctor or a nurse before they become, as you call it, train wrecks?
Because they don't have any money. You go to the ER, you get a $3,500 bill, and then what do? You're given a prescription, you can't fill it. That's why they're train wrecks. So they have nowhere else to go.
Somebody had to do something. Because black people are killing black people every day.
I got over 20% in my community. I have lack of economic development, lack of jobs, underfunded schools, boarded up houses, most coming back from prison. You create the perfect storm for them in whole communities that look like third world countries. It's a war zone.
Take a look at yourself and make a change.
America is in the middle of two crises these days. One natural, the other man-made. Definitely man-made.
I've seen a few, but I've gone out of ways to say I've never seen one like this. It is as if the nation is enduring some kind of curse. What should we expect next? That it will rain frogs? Can you bet against it?
We don't want to talk about anything else. Get that body count down. They agree. The principles, the candidates, you guys straight from the politics. Straight guys. They're going to commit. They lower their body count. We're coming up with this social
The city of Texas tells schools to disregard the guidance.
Well, in Texas, you can keep his 30 pieces of silver. We will not yield to blackmail.
If you wanna make a world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change.
You're open. Typically, a private jet. Why is that necessary as a minister? How many private jets do you have? Why?
They don't see it. They are asleep. They don't feel it. Some just don't look at
it. Shelves will be empty. The taps will run dry. And once hunger and despair take hold, people will do anything for survival. By day 5, everyone will be a potential threat.
If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand.
the security in the world. You have a police person in every aisle. If people don't care about their lives,
He died for our sins so that we could be saved. And in my religion, it means we can up as much as we want, and as long as we are truly sorry, then we're saved.
There is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down.